You know, folks assume that when an old man goes quiet, it means he's given up. But most of the time, it just means he's thinking. And thinking is the one thing life never managed to beat out of me. Before we dive into this one, let me just say, pull up a chair and breathe with me a moment. The world is loud enough already, and sometimes a slow story can teach you faster than the quick ones. If this one hits a little close to home, don't worry. You're in good company here. I bought that cottage in the forest for one reason. Quiet. Real quiet. The kind that makes you hear your heartbeat and wonder how long it's been since you listened to it. The smell of damp earth, the way the morning light slants between the pines, the crackle of the old wood stove. That place felt like a second chance wrapped in moss. I'd been there only a few weeks when the phone rang. My son-in-law never calls me unless he wants something, so I already braced myself. His voice came through sharp and hurried like he was reading off a script he wrote in a bathroom mirror.
"Harry, my parents are moving into your cottage. They need space. It's settled. If you don't like it, come back to the city."
There was a tiny click on the line. That soft breath people make when they're holding back. That was my daughter. He had her listening, as if her silence would make his words official. I stared out the window at a squirrel tearing into a pine cone like it owed him money. Funny what you notice in moments like that. My coffee had gone cold. My hand smelled faintly like cedar from the firewood I'd been stacking. And my heart, well, it didn't break. It just sank, heavy, like it had been dropped into deep river water. I wanted to ask why. Why they felt entitled to my peace. Why my daughter wouldn't speak up. Why some people think retirement means surrender. But the truth is, shouting at a brick wall only bruises your throat. So I didn't say a word. Not one. I let him talk. Let him fill the silence with his certainty. When he finally hung up, the forest seemed even quieter than before. Not peaceful. Just quiet, in that way a room feels when someone has said something they can't take back. I sat there for a long while, rolling that hurt around in my chest. And then, slowly, something steadier began to rise in me. Not anger, not spite. Just a simple, grounded knowing. Peace is worth protecting, even if you have to get creative about it. That was the moment the surprise began taking shape. A plan built not from rage, but from the kind of calm you only earn after 68 long years of watching people mistake kindness for weakness. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't call back. I just stood up, poured out the cold coffee, and started preparing. The next morning the forest felt different. Not hostile, just watchful, like it knew I was about to stir the still water. The air had that cold metallic smell it gets before sunrise, and the moss on the porch steps was damp enough to soak through my socks. I stood there for a minute, letting the quiet settle into my bones, because I knew the quiet wouldn't last. Part of getting older is realizing you can't stop people from disappointing you, but you can stop them from rearranging your life like it's a spare room they forgot they owned. And that's exactly what my son-in-law thought my cottage was. Convenient, available, and his to assign. He hadn't even asked his own parents what they wanted. He just made a decree and expected the world to applaud. I started my preparations in the same way you start a fire in an old cabin, slow and steady. The first step was the paperwork. I dug out the binder I keep tucked in the kitchen drawer, the one with the property maps, deeds, and every little document I've collected since signing the papers. When you grow up poor, you learn early that paper is power, and the one who keeps it organized usually wins the fight. I spent hours drafting a simple, airtight document, a rental agreement stating that no one, not family, not guests, not in-laws, could live on my property without my written consent. I added a few lines about liability, wells, septic issues, fire insurance, all the things that make city people blink real hard when they realize nature doesn't care about their plans. It was dry reading, but it was solid, the kind of solid that holds up in court. While I worked, I kept hearing my daughter's silence on that call. It bothered me more than her husband's arrogance. She used to challenge me on everything when she was a teenager. Why was she suddenly quiet now? Fear? Loyalty to him? Embarrassment? I didn't know. But the question stayed in the room like a second shadow. Around midday, I headed outside. The forest floor made that soft crunch under my boots as I walked the property line. The pines swayed, and every once in a while a gust sent the smell of sap and wet bark drifting through the air. I've always found answers easier to hear out there. People talk too loudly. Forests whisper. That's when I saw my neighbor, old Tom Caldwell, coming up the trail with his dog. Tom's one of those men who looks like he was carved directly out of the mountain. Weathered face, voice rough like river stones. He saw right through me with one glance. "You're walking like a man who's got a problem he doesn't want to say out loud," he said. I gave him the short version, not every detail, just enough for him to nod slowly and whistle through his teeth. "City folks," he muttered, "always assuming land is just space waiting for their decisions." His dog sniffed around my boots, tail flicking lazily. Tom crossed his arms. "If you're laying boundaries, do it before they show up. People don't respect fences that show up late." There it was, a quiet wisdom line delivered without ceremony. Forest men don't make speeches, they just tell you what works. That evening I hung 3 things on the front door. 1, my newly drafted rental agreement. 2, a printed notice stating that the cottage was legally single occupant and protected as such. 3, a very polite letter addressed to my son-in-law's parents. And that letter, that was the real heart of the surprise. I didn't scold them. I didn't shame them. I simply told them the truth he had hidden. He didn't ask me. He didn't consult me. And he didn't have the right to offer them my home. I wrote that I respected them too much to let them walk into a situation built on someone else's lie. I ended it by inviting them, for a visit not a move, whenever they wanted to come experience the forest properly. No tension, no drama, just calm, steady truth. The next 2 days were quiet. Too quiet. Even the birds seemed to pause between their calls, waiting. On the 3rd morning, as fog drifted low between the trees like pale smoke, I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel road. A white SUV rolled up the drive. 2 figures stepped out, his parents, carrying suitcases and wearing the hopeful, weary expressions of people who'd been told a story they wanted to believe. Behind them came the 2nd car. My son-in-law. He slammed his door a little too hard, already irritated, already ready to perform. He spotted me on the porch and gave a smile I didn't return. "You didn't answer my calls," he said. "I didn't have anything to add," I replied. He opened his mouth to fire back, but his parents had already reached the porch. Their eyes went to the papers taped neatly on the door. Their expressions shifted. Confusion first, then the slow, uncomfortable bloom of realization. His father cleared his throat. "Harry, is this true? You didn't agree to this?" His mother looked downright embarrassed. "We were told you insisted we move in, that you'd be lonely out here." There it was. The lie he spun was unraveling before he even had a chance to tighten the knots. My son-in-law's jaw dropped, then clenched. "Dad, Mom, it's not, he's exaggerating, he's just—" But they weren't listening to him anymore. They were reading my letter, slowly, carefully, quietly, and as they read, I could almost feel the forest leaning in around us. Because silence, when used right, is a scalpel, and the truth was cutting exactly where it needed to. His mother was the first to lift her eyes from the letter. And the look she gave her son, my son-in-law, wasn't angry. It was worse. It was disappointed in that deep parental way that strips a grown man down to the boy he used to be. Her voice came out quiet but steady. "You lied to us." Not shouted, not dramatic, just a simple truth laid bare in the cold forest air. His father folded the letter with careful hands, the kind of hands that have built things and broken things and know the difference between the two. He slipped it into his coat pocket like evidence. "We packed our entire house," his father said. "We trusted you, and you didn't even bother to ask this man before dragging us into your mess?" My son-in-law stammered, waving his arms like he was swatting invisible flies. "It's not, Dad, it's complicated. He doesn't need this house. He's alone out here. He's old. He said it was fine." I didn't move, didn't speak. I just let the wind blow my porch chimes, that soft metallic ringing that sounded almost like laughter. His mother looked at me then, really looked, at the lines age had carved around my eyes, at the stack of firewood I'd split with my own hands, at the doorway I'd claimed with quiet dignity. "Harry, I'm so sorry. We had no idea he hadn't spoken to you." I gave her a small nod. "No apology needed. You're guests here, and guests deserve the truth." That word, Truth hung in the air like smoke, heavy, sharp, impossible to ignore. My son-in-law stepped forward, jaw tight, cheeks flushed. Look, this is being blown out of proportion. Dad, Mom, you need a place to stay. He's got a whole cottage to himself. What difference does it make if... His father cut him off with a raised hand, a clean, authoritative gesture that froze him mid-sentence. You don't take what isn't yours, he said. Not a house, not a promise, not a man's peace. Watching him stand there, being corrected by his own father, I felt something I didn't expect. A flicker of pity. Not much, but enough to remind me that people aren't born selfish. They learn it from fear or shame, or the belief that they'll never be enough unless they control everything around them. His mother stepped toward me. The forest light caught the silver in her hair, and she looked like someone who'd spent a long time being reasonable for people who didn't deserve it. Harry, would it be all right if we came inside for a moment, just to talk? Of course, I said, opening the door. And I swear, even the trees seemed to release a breath. The smell of cedar washed out from the doorway, and the warmth from the wood stove drifted into the cold morning like a welcome. They stepped in gently like they didn't want to disturb the peace. My son-in-law followed behind them like a man walking into a courtroom he didn't realize he was entering. Inside, the cottage looked exactly how I wanted it to. Simple, honest, lived in. A stack of birch logs beside the stove. A kettle half full on the cast-iron top. Clean floors that creaked with their own stories. The coffee I'd set to brew filled the air with that dark, earthy smell that forgives a lot of sins. His father sat at my table without waiting to be invited. Not out of rudeness, just out of the quiet authority of a man who needed answers. Why didn't you tell us he hadn't asked you? He asked me. I shrugged. Didn't seem like my truth to deliver. It was his. My son-in-law's face twisted. Harry, this is ridiculous. You're acting like a victim. His mother snapped her gaze to him. Not another word. And for once he listened. She turned back to me. He told us you were begging for company. That you felt lonely out here. That you wanted us to fill the space. He said you even offered to give us the master bedroom. I let that sit for a moment. Lies expand in silence, but they also collapse there. I came here to be alone, I said gently. Not because I hate people. Because I wanted the quiet. The space to breathe my own air again. His mother nodded slowly. I understand that more than you think. We talked for a while. About life. About aging parents. About kids who mean well, but get lost in their own storms. They apologized again, but not with guilt, with mutual respect. And I found myself liking them, really liking them. Good people caught in the crossfire of someone else's insecurity. Meanwhile, my son-in-law paced the room like a trapped animal. He finally stopped by the window, arms folded, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. His father spoke again, voice firm. Son, you owe this man an apology. My son-in-law snapped his head around. For what? He could have said something. He could have just told me no. I moved my finger across the edge of my coffee mug, feeling the heat, the weight of it. Some things shouldn't need to be said, I replied. Especially when the wrong is loud enough on its own. His father exhaled, long and tired. You lied to all of us, and now you're blaming the man you lied about. His mother stood. We're going back to the city. We won't impose on you, Harry. I shook my head slowly. You're welcome here. As visitors, as friends, if you want that. The cottage isn't a battlefield. You don't need to leave because of someone else's choices. She gave me a soft smile, the kind that says, thank you for seeing me separate from the mess I'm tied to. But my son-in-law? His pride was cracking like thin ice, and instead of breaking clean, it splintered. You always do this, he said to me. You make me look bad. You act like the wise old man while I'm the villain. I didn't raise my voice, didn't stand, didn't change my expression. I didn't make you anything, I said. I just didn't cover up what you made yourself. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then his father stood, gripping his son's shoulder, not gently. You're coming with us, he said, now. And they walked out into the cold together, his parents with dignity, him with the weight of consequences that finally found him. His mother paused at the door. Harry, thank you for handling this with more grace than any of us deserved. After they drove off, the forest went still again. Not empty, just honest. the way it was before anyone tried to force something onto it. I stepped outside, felt the wind brush my cheek, smelled the pine and wood smoke. And I realized something simple, something steady. Silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it's just the place where truth gathers its strength. And mine had finally spoken. After they drove away, I stood on the porch a long while, watching the dust settle on the dirt road as the forest slowly reclaimed the quiet they had stirred up. There's a moment after conflict, right after the door closes, the engines fade, the voices stop, when the world feels like it's holding its breath, almost asking you, all right, who are you now? The kettle inside clicked softly as it cooled, and that tiny sound grounded me. I stepped back in, poured what was left of the coffee, and sat at the table where all of that truth had unfolded just an hour earlier. Their fingerprints were still on the mugs. A scarf one of them left behind still hung on the back of the chair. The cottage smelled faintly of wet shoes, wood smoke, and a kind of honesty that lingers after people finally say the things they should have said years ago. It didn't feel like a victory. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like clarity, the kind that arrives late, but exactly when you're ready to see it. I thought about my daughter, her silence, the way she hadn't said a word on that call. I didn't blame her, but I couldn't pretend it didn't hurt. I raised that girl to speak her mind. Where had that fire gone? Or maybe she still had it, but it was dimmed under someone else's shadow. The cottage creaked as the afternoon sun warmed the beams, and the sound reminded me of her laughter when she was small. That ache in my chest sharpened. I knew I needed to call her, but not yet, not in anger and not in shame. I wanted to reach her from a place of steadiness, not wounded pride. Silence can be strong, but it can also be a wall, and I didn't want to build one between us. Later that afternoon, I grabbed my coat and walked the trail behind the cottage. The pine needles underfoot made that soft, whispery crunch, and the air smelled like rain was on its way. A distant woodpecker tapped at a dead trunk. A slow, rhythmic knock like nature was reminding me that everything worthwhile takes time to break open. I walked until the sun tilted low and the forest turned gold. By the time I got back, my phone had 3 missed calls. From my daughter, not him. That told me more than any apology could. I called her back. Her voice came on small, shaky. Dad, I'm so sorry. There was no script in her tone, no rehearsed lines, just a daughter trying to find her way back to her father after losing the map. I know you didn't agree with what he did, she said. I should have spoken up. I didn't know how. I leaned against the door frame and watched a squirrel race across the fence like it had somewhere urgent to be. Sweetheart, I said, silence can be safety. I'm not angry at you, but I won't pretend it didn't hurt. She exhaled sharply, a trembling sound. I know. I hate that he put all of us in that position, and I hate that I let it happen. I'm just glad you called, I said softly. That's where repair starts. We talked a long time. Longer than we had in months. She admitted things I didn't expect. About pressure, about feeling torn, about the fear that speaking would make everything worse. Truth be told, I understood. I've lived enough years to know that most people don't stay silent out of cruelty. They stay silent out of exhaustion. Before we hung up, she whispered, Dad, thank you for handling it the way you did. I don't know how you stayed so calm. I chuckled, rubbing the back of my neck. Age, sweetheart, and knowing that shouting doesn't make a man taller, it just makes the room smaller. She laughed through her tears, a good sound, a healing sound. That night, the forest hummed softly outside the windows, the low croak of distant frogs, the wind brushing the treetops, the occasional snap of a twig as some creature wandered the underbrush. I lit a single lamp and sat in my chair by the stove, blanket over my knees, warmth settling into my bones. I thought about the whole ordeal, how easily people can wound each other when they move too fast, assume too much, speak too loudly, how silence, when chosen, not forced, can be a shield instead of a cage. And then came a memory from decades ago. My own father once told me, when people push into your life like they own it, don't push back with fists, push back with boundaries. Took me nearly 70 years to fully understand that. The next morning I found a letter in my mailbox, handwritten, from his parents. They thanked me for the hospitality, for the respect, for not turning the situation into something uglier than it already was. They said they hoped to visit again, properly, next time. Maybe in the summer, when the forest is thick and green and humming with life. I smiled reading it. Genuine warmth. They weren't the villains. They were just two people who'd been handed a story someone else wrote for them. A week passed, then two. My daughter called more often. Sometimes he was in the background, quiet, respectful, humbled by the consequences he'd earned. We weren't ready for a family dinner, not yet, but small bridges were being built. And small bridges, when cared for, can grow into something sturdy. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge and the sky turned that burnt orange color that always makes me feel alive, I sat on the porch with a fresh cup of tea. Steam drifted into the cool air, and the scent of mint wrapped around me. And you know what I realized? If I'd shouted that day, if I'd argued, if I'd tried to win, I would have lost something more important than any cottage. My peace, my dignity, my chance to let the truth reveal itself. Silence didn't just protect me, it revealed everyone else. And that, friends, is something an old man earns only after enough storms and enough mistakes. So if you're listening to this with a heavy heart, wondering how to deal with the noise in your own life, remember this: you don't have to meet chaos at its volume. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is step back, breathe deep, and let the truth walk out on its own feet. Thanks for sitting with me a while. If you want to hear another story, I've got plenty tucked away like firewood. Some warm, some sharp, all honest. Stick around if you'd like. I'll put another log on the stove while you get comfortable. Just an old man's 2 cents, but peace always starts with the courage to choose yourself.